Attending an academic conference can be a very rewarding experience, especially for a graduate student, but it requires some planning. In this video, I will walk you through each step of planning an academic conference trip. I will also show you an example of my own planning for a conference that I am planning to attend later this year. If you're a returning visitor, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Odile and I'm a lecturer. On my page, you'll find a lot of useful resources for planning if you're a student or an academic. You'll also find resources to help you write the best possible academic documents. Let's get to it. The first thing you need to do is choose a conference and submit an abstract or paper. It's important to take note of whether you will need a full paper for submission or whether an abstract will be sufficient. When you make your submission, it's also important to ensure that your submission fits into one or more of the conference themes. If your submission does not fit into a conference theme, you are increasing the chances of getting your submission rejected. In my case, I really wanted to attend the annual conference of the International Association for Time Use Research. They had a variety of themes, but my abstract was on time use differences between married and cohabiting individuals. So I chose the socio-demographics of time use allocation as my theme. Overall, conference themes are usually quite abstract, but specific sub-themes, such as the socio-demographics of time use allocation, are usually used to group presenters together into sessions. The overall theme for my conference was sustainable society and time use research. But if your submission doesn't fit into a specific sub-theme or there aren't enough submissions for the sub-theme you've chosen, you run the risk of getting rejected. It does help to use the language of the overall conference theme or the sub-theme that you've chosen. If you do so, it makes it easier for the paper selection committee to see that your paper does in fact fit into the overall objectives of the conference, and you make it easier for them to accept your submission. Once you have your submission accepted, the next important step is ensuring that you have funding. If you don't have funding, you will not be able to attend the conference, even if your paper does get in. These days, you can also opt to present online if that option is available. But even if you do present online, there will still be a cost involved in participating in the conference. But before diving into finding out how much money you will need to attend, make sure that you don't qualify for any exemptions or discounts. You will usually find these on the conference website. Conferences usually prioritize early career scholars and scholars from the Global South, especially international conferences. In my case, I managed to get a reduced conference fee and a reduced membership rate due to being an academic in the Global South. The conference registration fee is only one of many costs involved in attending a conference. And if you're going to need to ask for money, you will need to know how much money you need to ask for. And this is where estimates become useful. So to give you an idea of how to estimate your costs, I'm going to run you through the process that I use to estimate all the different costs involved in attending a conference. So the first thing you will need is the dates for the conference. This will usually be on the conference website itself. So in my case, the conference will run from the 28th to the 30th of November this year. But usually, sometimes, not always, there will be a pre-conference workshop. These are useful if you are an early career scholar or a graduate student. For this conference, there will in fact be a pre-conference workshop which will take place on the 27th of November. So I would need to be in Japan on the 27th of November in order to attend the pre-conference workshop, and then I can leave either on the evening of the 30th or the next day. But when I arrive and depart will be dependent on flights and their prices. So it's important to estimate the costs of the flight and see which flights are in fact available. I usually use Travelstar to do this. In terms of dates, I'd like to be there on the 27th, so perhaps I would need to arrive on the 26th, and because Japan is not next door to Africa, I'm going to choose a departure on the 25th, although I can always amend this. And you will recall that the last day of the conference is the 30th, so I'm going to try use the 1st as my first return flight. So you'll see that I have a number of flight options available, and the idea here really is not to choose your actual flight, but to get an estimate of the cost of a return flight, because that's what you'll need for the budget. Okay, so you'll see that they start at about 15,000 Rand, including luggage, and of course they just become more expensive as you move further down. So I think it's safe to say that the average return flight will cost between 15 and 17,000 Rand. If you are drawing up a hypothetical budget, I would go with the upper limit, which is about 17,000 Rand. And if you happen to have money left over, then so be it. So the next thing you would need to do is estimate the cost of your accommodation. Of course, this will depend on your flights, because your flights will determine which day you are arriving and which day you are leaving, and by extension, how many nights of accommodation you will need. I usually use Booking.com for this part, but before I even go there, I will need to make an assumption about what my flight plan would look like. So I'm going to go back to the flights for a moment. So I'm going to just choose the first flight here and click on flight details. And the first part of the flight details basically shows the arrival flight. So this is what the trip to Tokyo would look like. And you'll see that the arrival via Doha will be on the 26th of November, which is the Sunday before the Monday of the pre-conference workshop, which I want to attend. So this plan would be fairly suitable. This also means, however, that I will get there very late and I'll probably be tired on Monday. But usually conferences are a quick in and out unless you are extending a holiday. So in the bigger scheme of things, I don't think that it'll make such a big difference whether I land on the evening of the 26th or on the afternoon of the 26th. If I hypothetically book this flight, it would mean that I would need somewhere to sleep on the night of the 26th. So that would be my first night in my accommodation. Now we would actually need to look at the returning flight. Again, it goes via Doha, and the departure is on the 1st of December, very late at night, with an arrival at 3:30 in the afternoon in Johannesburg on the 2nd of December. So this is quite a long journey and demonstrates why it's beneficial to live in the middle of the world map and not at the bottom. But this is a good journey nonetheless. I think it's sort of as good as it's going to get. So basically, based on this flight plan, I'll be arriving on the 26th of November and I will check out on the morning of the 1st of December. So if you go to your calendar, that would give you 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. And then a checkout on the 1st of December. So that's a total of 5 nights that I will need accommodation for. So I'm going to go over to Booking.com now to look at what's available in terms of accommodation. The nice thing about Booking.com is that you can actually put in a particular venue, not just a place, for instance, and it would show you which hotels are available close to that venue that you've chosen. So to find my venue, I'm actually going to go back to the conference website to see where they said the conference was taking place, so I don't end up booking a hotel that's on the other side of town and then I sort of have to find public transport or Uber back and forth, which by the way will result in additional costs. This conference is taking place at Kio Plaza Hotel in Tokyo, and my check-in date, which I have now determined, is the 26th of November, and my checkout is on 1st of December. So the first option there is Kio Plaza itself. I hope I'm pronouncing this properly. It would obviously be great to live at the plaza because that would mean that I'm living inside the actual conference venue and I won't need to travel back and forth or walk back and forth to my hotel. This is also a good option if you are not familiar with where you are going. I've never actually been to Japan myself, so it would be great if I could live in the actual conference venue. Although the thing about conference venues is that they are usually hosted in sort of luxury hotels and they tend to be very expensive, so that's not always possible. But if you can do that, then go ahead. If not, Booking.com sort of gives you a sense of what other hotels are in the vicinity, and it usually also gives you the distance to the venue that you've chosen or to the town center. Okay, so you can see there are a bunch of options here. So based on how the other hotels are priced, it is clear that Kio Hotel is in fact a luxury venue. So it looks as if though this could include a price anything from 5,000 Rand to 30,000 Rand. As an academic, I obviously can't choose the 30,000 Rand option. Not only might I not have the funding for that, but it would probably require significant motivation. So it would be good to sort of get a sense of what would be reasonable in terms of like a mid-range based on all these prices. Again, the point here is not to choose your actual hotel. The point is to get an estimate of the costs. Based on the cost here, I would be comfortable with estimating between 10 and 12,000 Rand. If you are applying for money, you do not want to go with the 5,000 Rand option, because if you do eventually end up going and perhaps you only get your money at the last minute and all the 5,000 Rand options are booked out, you want to make sure that you sort of have room for maneuvering. But at the same time, you don't want to include the audacious 30,000 Rand option. So I'm going to go with about 12,000 Rand just to be on the safe side. So based on what you've chosen in terms of your airport and your accommodation, you might likely need ground transport. This is often something that people forget about. It's very difficult to estimate what ground transport would be, so I usually include an arbitrary figure. Ground transport would include, for instance, how you get from the airport to the hotel. That would cost you money, and if you are living a little bit of a distance away from your hotel, how much it would cost you if you had to travel by public transport or using an Uber or whatever to get to and from the conference venue. If you're walking, of course, it won't cost you anything. But for ground transport, I usually put down a 5,000 Rand. Often because Ubers and trains are not that expensive in most parts of the world. Sometimes you might be lucky and find that your hotel has a free airport transfer service and the hotel is within walking distance to the conference venue, in which case you won't use the ground transport budget, but it's always good to have it there, because what you don't want to have is a situation where you don't have enough money for everything that you need. The next item is subsistence, and I will give a disclaimer at this point that this item might only be useful for academics and students based in South Africa, because the subsistence rate that we use comes from the South African Revenue Service. If you're not from South Africa, your revenue service might also provide these rates. I don't know how it works in other countries, but if you are based in South Africa, come along. This part of the video will be useful for you. In order to determine subsistence, you need to go over to the SARS website to see what the rate is for the particular country that you're traveling to. And then you would also need to know how many days of subsistence you will need, because the rate is a daily rate. If you recall from the flight plan that I'm working with, I'll be traveling from the 25th of November to the 2nd of December, although I will not count the 25th of November as a traveling date, because as you can see, the flight leaves at 8:30 in the evening, which is almost the end of the day. I'm going to start counting my days on the 26th. So that'll be the 26th, the 27th, the 28th, the 29th, and the 30th, with a checkout on the 1st. I'm going to go back to the flight plan now, because I need to see what time I am actually leaving on the 1st. So you'll see, based on this flight itinerary, I will be departing at 5 to 10 on the 1st of December. So I am going to include that as a day on which I need subsistence. So subsistence days will be the 26th, the 27th, the 28th, the 29th, the 30th, and the 1st. So I'm going to need 6 days of subsistence. So I'm including 6 days on my spreadsheet, and then I'm going to include the daily rate, which I'm going to find on the SARS website. So these are the local rates. I am attending an international conference, so I need international rates. Okay, so you can see the 2023 rate is the same as the 2020 rate. So I'm going to click on the 2020 rates. So here you will find a list of countries and the subsistence rate quoted in the currency of the country you're traveling to. I am going to Japan. They use the yen, and the subsistence rate per day is 16,275 yen. I'm going to include that value here, and then I'm going to include the exchange rate. So there are one of two ways that you can do this. You can either convert the yen to rands using the exchange rate, or you can just use Google to do it for you. That's 2,107 rands. So I'm not going to put this amount in the main column. I'm going to put it in a side column because I still need to multiply it by the number of days I'll be traveling. Okay, so I'm going to say 6 days times 2,000 rand. That gives me subsistence of about 12,600 rand. So if there's a change in the exchange rate, that value will change. But unless there is like some dramatic world event, which in today's world is not unthinkable, the changes won't be as much. So I'm going to leave that as it is to show that I at least have one accurate calculation in my estimation or in my budget. So the last item on my list is a visa. I need to actually find out how much it costs to get a Japanese visa in South Africa. So it seems like e-visas are available and the visa costs 3,000 yen. Let me try another site. Applicants do not need to make an appointment. Visa fees 360 rand. Okay, so I'm gonna add 360 rand for the visa. It wouldn't be the most expensive visa I've paid for, but basically this would now give me an estimate of how much it would cost to attend this conference. So overall, it looks like this conference is going to cost me about 45,000 rand. The nice thing about doing this budget is if you get an opportunity to apply for funding and you need to submit the application quickly, you already have a budget sort of worked out for the conference. If it's part of, developing your paper, you can add it in as part of your costs, if it's allowed. So once you have an estimate of the costs, it's important to know how you are actually allowed to pay for all these things. At my institution, we have to make use of formal procurement procedures, and if there's a deviation from this procedure, then you need to sort of write a motivation. So to avoid all that admin, our finance team tries to have us make use of travel agents who are approved in the university system as suppliers. The downside to using the travel agents is that they can be expensive, but they usually try their best to find you the best deal. In my case, the travel agent actually happened to find me a cheaper option of flights, which was about 14,000 and something rand, less than 15,000, and also less than the 17,000 that I had budgeted for. Although this doesn't always happen, so it's best to stick to the larger number when doing your estimates. The other benefit of going through this process is once you do approach the travel agents, in my case it would be the travel agents, you actually have an idea of what you want your itinerary to look like. You have an idea of where it is that you want to stay, so you can give them very specific instructions, although they are also going to give you the best available options that they have. But once you have the costs, you can answer one question for yourself, and that is it worth it? In my case, I really want to become acquainted with more time use researchers. Another consideration that would go into answering that question is whether you have enough time to gather the funds that you need for the conference. So conferences are usually announced at short notice, especially if you are not part of the associations that are organizing the conferences. If you are, you may know beforehand, which would be great. For instance, IAFI, which I am a part of, have already announced where the 2024 conference will take place and where it'll be next year. And we haven't even had this year's conference yet. So in that case, you can plan ahead. But sometimes you just get told a few months beforehand. So if you have funding available, you need to think about whether you want to use your funding for that one that you know is going to happen soon, or whether you need a longer term plan because you don't have funding available. So you need to decide whether you have enough time to raise money if you don't have money readily available. Otherwise, you need to choose a conference that has a longer timeline in terms of the notice they give for the conference. Another important thing is that the sequence of events may not always work this way. So you may apply for conference funding as part of a bigger grant application, and you would then put down these costs even if you don't know yet when or where the conference will take place. Doing these calculations beforehand will nonetheless help you to determine how much such a trip may cost. And as you start traveling more, you'll have an idea of how much an international or a domestic flight costs and how much it costs to get a visa process. This way you can ensure that you have money available for conferences at a future date. So assuming that you got into your conference and you've applied for funding and you've made all your bookings, the next step will be to get ready to travel. A really important part of this preparation will include having your presentation ready. If you submitted an abstract based on research that you've already conducted, it's really beneficial to try and write a full draft of your paper before you go into the conference. That way you have a full draft out of the conference which you can then tweak based on the comments that you're going to get during the conference. This means that by the time you get out of the conference, you will already have a full draft that may be sort of 90% ready for submission, which would definitely be a great outcome for a conference presentation. However, if you are attending the conference just to get some feedback on work in progress where you're still going to significantly alter the analysis, then it might be best to not write the paper. It's also really important to pack the right tools to make sure that you have a successful conference presentation, and perhaps I'll do another video on this at a future date. But as a rule, I usually travel with the following items. So I have a conference outfit determined beforehand, so not just throwing in clothes and hoping that I'll find something when I get there. I always travel with an HDMI cable and a converter for my MacBook, and then of course I need the actual computer itself. So I'll usually have that along with me. I'll have an international plug converter if I need one. And then of course chargers for laptops, phones, tablets, whatever electronic device you are traveling with. I hope that this gets you one step closer to whatever conference you want to attend. If there's any part of this video that you need me to elaborate further on or need me to do another video on, you can let me know in the comments below. Remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Happy travels!